Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with Jeff Nyquist, a very serious strategic analyst and a guy who's been following very closely what is happening in Ukraine, among other places. And Jeff, you were just saying that the calculation that Putin made may not have been a function of the sense that the United States and presumably the rest of the West would have no particular problem if he went into Ukraine. Finish that thought, if
Well,
you would.
Russia, given the economic sanctions that they could have expected, and also the opposition and the future trouble, they could only have contemplated doing this if they had some kind of deal with the Chinese. China is an extremely powerful economy. This can support them economically. They have allies in Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, other places in Africa. But China is the one that can give them the support. Now, what are the Chinese getting if they give this support? The Chinese have their own aggressive objectives. They've built the biggest navy in terms of the number of warships in the world. And March is a very good time of year for naval operations in the Western Pacific. It just happens. So I'm asking the question, did this happen in February despite the bad ground conditions because the Russians have made a commitment to the Chinese and the Chinese have their own plan for aggressive action this month?
That sounds right to me, Jeff, I have to say. So the idea would have been that there was a distraction by the Russians, get everybody focused on Europe, on Ukraine specifically, embroil the international organizations and the rest of the hand wringers on that subject. And meanwhile, the main action is going to come against Taiwan in the form of an actual attack by the
Well, you
Chinese,
know
do you
that
reckon?
Taiwan is more likely to be defended by Japan and the United States than Ukraine would be by NATO. And so it was a safe bet, I think, for Putin, as long as he made lots of threats, like the nuclear war threat. Plus, you have the flagship of the Northern Fleet and the Pacific Fleet in the Mediterranean, strong task force that have to be watched by us. So we have naval, yeah, this is Russia. The Russian Northern Fleet and Pacific fleets are in the Med, and they're tying up our ships. They're tying up troops that were sent to Eastern Europe to watch this situation at the border, that it doesn't spill over. The Russians even accidentally, on purpose, I think, on purpose, through the president of uh, Belarus, Lukashenko, released a map showing that the Baltic states and Moldova are next in line. So this is causing us indeed to concentrate on Russia and air assets too. So that makes the Pacific more of a vulnerable spot to be next.
Yeah. Interestingly, it seems to me that one of the things that might prompt all of those assets being in the Eastern Mediterranean is Russia's determination to try to protect its allies there, Syria and Iran, imperfect though they may be, from an action by Israel, which is seemingly increasingly in
They
development as
have,
well.
yep.
But just coming back to China, Jeff, if the Chinese have decided not simply to try to coerce Taiwan into submission or envelop it, perhaps even by doing some movements to sort of encircle them with Philippine territory being seized. Uh, is it your estimation at this point that sometime within the next few days, perhaps, or certainly weeks in March, that the Chinese will mount an amphibious operation
It is
against Taiwan?
possible they have massed the troops for an amphibious operation. But I must say the Chinese leaders may be risk averse to an amphibious invasion and they may prefer a blockade. And the reason that the good weather is important is that, you can run a blockade in bad weather. So it may be a blockade, and maybe they'll invade if the blockade is not working fast enough. I don't know, but I would think they would do a blockade first because of watching them. They don't like to be defeated or perceived to be weak or losing, and a blockade is less risky.
Would you anticipate, Jeff? Did you say that they are massing
They
troops
they
for an
they were massing
amphibious
troops.
attack
They've
at
been
this point?
putting troops opposite Taiwan here since the pandemic started. About They started doing this and talking about invading in April of 2020. That war was coming, and that they alerted the army.
And they indicated, as I understand it, during the roughly the time the president was doing his so-called State of the Union address, that they were uh, there was nothing that the United States could do about Taiwan, and the clear implication is that they've set their sights on demonstrating that. So, Jeff Nyquist, let me just ask you in closing: when you look at this situation, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in the Eastern Mediterranean, whether it's in um, China's backyard, Taiwan, and so on, um, are we at the cusp of possibly a global conflict, World War III, if
Seeing
you
the
will?
reaction in Europe and in the US, I think we are. I think that the emotions are running high, seeing people being destroyed and countries being destroyed on this scale. I don't think the West can stop itself from wanting to intervene, and these powers have made a commitment to push out. So I think the combination of the two, I think at some point a world war, a major war between major powers is now inevitable.
Wow. And Jeff, one of the things that Vladimir Putin has done, as you know, in just the past few days, in response in part to the Europeans' retaliation against him for the invasion of Ukraine, has been to raise the alert level on his nuclear forces. Um, there have actually been some statements to the effect that if there is a world war, it will be a nuclear one as well. Do you anticipate that that's what we're looking at? Should it go
Yeah,
there?
the Russian military doctrine is to go immediately over to nukes if there's a world war. The Putin, that was one of the first things Putin did when he became president 22 years ago, is he adopted that doctrine. So I'm afraid it doesn't look good. I mean, I don't know how they're going to avoid a war. Russia and China seem determined to push out. You look at Iran is about ready to break out with their nuclear weapons in a matter of weeks, I'm told,
Right.
and that may be why that Russian fleet is there leading on Israel. So,
Indeed, I think it is, and it's certainly why Israel's level of activity seems to be intensifying as well. Jeff Nyquist, these are grim tidings. Needless to say, I think we both hope you're wrong. I fear you may be right, and in any event, it's why we're here, is to cover these kinds of stories and take them where they lead. We'll look forward to visiting with you again in the near future for that purpose. I want to thank the rest of you for being with us for this edition of Securing America.